I read a post that you've put that every 4 minutes a woman is detected with breast cancer.
So you may have heard that 1 in 8 women will develop cancer in their lifetime, but this is the Western data.
Okay.
So we actually have only 1 in 24, 1 in 26 women who develop breast cancer in their lifetime in urban India. Obesity, that really increases your risk of breast cancer, especially menopausal obesity. Drinking alcohol as little as 3 drinks a week can increase your risk of breast cancer.
Wow. What about sugar? A lot of people talk about this link between sugar and cancer.
Yeah, that's a big myth, by the way, that
Really?
Sugar feeds cancer.
Can you name some foods that help lower the risk of breast cancer, if there's any such foods?
What we can tell you is what to avoid. Definitely avoid red meats and avoid anything that comes out of packet. Overall, whole grains, flaxseed, leafy green vegetables, and healthy, nutritious food is good for you.
So many scientific advancements are taking place, especially in the area of medicine, and still the world has not found a cure for cancer. In fact, every year the cases are increasing and the younger demographic seems to be getting affected. There are, of course, treatments, but those can be very debilitating, not to mention extremely expensive. So what can we do to minimize the risk of cancer? And how do we diagnose it early enough so that it can be cured? It doesn't have to be Breast Cancer Awareness Month for us to have this very important discussion. To bust some myths and clear our doubts, we have with us on Buzz by the Bay a young oncologist and breast cancer surgeon and oncoplastic consultant who is affiliated with the very reputed Jaslok Hospital in Mumbai, Dr. Karishma Kirti. Hi doctor, welcome on Buzz by the Bay.
Hi Anushka, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you. This is a very important discussion, no matter, which month and what awareness
No,
day
and
it
I
is.
thought that was a very important point you brought out, because suddenly in October you see everyone talking about it, and as soon as it gets over, people move on to the next thing.
Absolutely. So you are a young oncologist, a breast cancer surgeon, plus you specialize in oncoplastic surgery and consultancy. So if you could, for the audience, just break it down, what is oncoplastic surgery?
So oncoplastic breast surgery is exactly what it sounds like. So onco basically means cancer, and plasty stands for plastic surgery. And in oncoplasty, we mesh together the skills of oncological surgery or the safety of oncological surgery along with plastic surgery, and what are the benefits that you get from plastic surgery, which is mainly cosmesis, right, and organ preservation. And it's always oncology first, and but we try to save the breast and use some plastic surgery techniques to recreate the breast. Okay. So if it's a small lump and we are doing breast conservation, we may just move breast tissue around and give the shape again, the mound of the breast. And if it's something like a mastectomy, in which we are removing the entire breast, we might reconstruct the whole breast. That can be done using an implant or some tissue from a different area of the body, like the abdomen or the back.
Okay, so basically it's to improve the cosmetic outcome.
Yes, but always understand that cosmetic outcome is not as straightforward as it sounds. It really affects mental well-being, self-confidence, self-image, sexual issues of women down the line.
Absolutely, you're right. I mean, you can say that, oh, image doesn't matter, but the truth is we live in a world where it does. And, there is a lot of image issues that women have as it is in this world, in this Instagram world that we live in. So obviously having a positive cosmetic outcome is important, given of course the health, the oncology aspect should take, precedence over that.
Onco before plastic.
Yeah, all right. But do you perform the plastic surgery bit as well?
Yes, so to an extent we do the plastic surgery bit as well. As I said, when there are levels of breast oncoplasty. So when we are just moving breast tissue around, it's called level 1. And if we are using some tissue around the breast, which are called like pedicled flaps or local flaps, and we are moving that into the breast, we're doing that. Sometimes we also do something known as reduction or therapeutic mammoplasty, in which if we excise a larger area, we can reduce the size of that breast, and the opposite breast, which it does not have a disease, we can also reduce that and give it a lift so that both the breasts are symmetrical. There is, as we talked about earlier, mastectomy, in which we do a whole breast recon. Generally, that is the place where I would like to have a plastic surgeon come in, because that's where we are doing microvascular anastomosis. So if I take a bit of tissue from the abdomen and put it there, it's not going to survive until it has blood supply. So that's when the microscope comes in, and the plastic surgeons, they join artery to artery, vein to vein, so that the bit of tissue that's coming, that is vital tissue that gets blood supply and can survive to give that shape.
Wow, so much cutting edge, techniques and surgeries taking place nowadays. But is it becoming more popular in India, this whole oncoplastic surgery thing?
So definitely, it's catching on, especially breast conservation surgery and reconstruction to an extent. Where we find a challenge sometimes is when we talk about a reduction of the opposite side. So a lot of times we find that women don't want to touch the opposite side because if it doesn't have disease, maybe they don't want to do anything to it.
Who is a candidate for breast reconstruction or whatever it is, filling in the tissue or any kind of oncoplastic surgery? Is everyone with breast cancer a candidate, or would you have a cutoff at an age, or would you have a cutoff at a level? Would it be only like, maybe stage 1, 2 is a candidate? Maybe if you're that metastatic stage, it's just you're not a candidate. I mean, how does it work?
So there are multiple things that we take into consideration, and every patient, of course, is an individual choice and a discussion. What does the patient want? What can you offer them is an important thing. So definitely when you come with a smaller tumor, it's less technically challenging to save the breast. And because we want to always be safe and we want the least chance of local recurrence, so we want to take out the tumor, we also want to take out a margin, and then we have to see how much breast is left. So if someone has multiple lumps in one breast, and if you take out 3 tumors, there won't be much breast left. So those are the patients who will go for a mastectomy, breast removal, but we will reconstruct the breast for them, yes. And always understand that when we are doing a breast conservation, whether we are closing it or we are putting a flap in there, those are the patients who have their own breast tissue left will definitely need radiotherapy. So this patient should be willing to take radiotherapy. It should be feasible for them to take radiotherapy. A lot of sometimes you can have an older patient who is not able to come on, who would rather just have a mastectomy. So another thing is patient choice. What does the patient want? So a patient may be conservable but may not choose to conserve, and that is a very valid reason. If you, I mean, eventually it's my body. If I want to remove my breast, I should be allowed to. I mean, breast cancer is a valid reason to do that. We can always, then the other thing is skin involvement. So it also depends on how much skin is involved. If the tumor is small, if the skin is not involved, then we can save the skin, and that gives one of the best cosmesis. But if you have to take the skin out, then when we put that skin, then you can see that a different part of the skin has come in. So there's lots of different things that we look at. Definitely in breast cancer, in a metastatic patient, especially someone who is floridly metastatic. That means that not that they have one small site that has a metastasis, but like multiple mets in multiple sites or multiple mets in one site, then those patients are not candidates for surgery at all. So let alone oncoplastic surgery.
Right. And thanks for clarifying that. And just for the audience, metastatic means when it's spread all over the body, right?
Yeah, spread outside from its primary organ. So for the breast, it could most likely be lung or liver or bones. Those are the 3 main, or the brain.
But if someone comes with a stage 2, let's say, a more regionalized cancer, is it possible?
Yes. So the other thing that we've started doing is that our systemic therapy has improved a lot. So in patients, say, who come with the other thing that is important is breast to tumor ratio. So in a larger breast, a smaller tumor is easier to take out. So a 3 centimeter tumor in a D cup breast versus a 3 centimeter tumor in an A cup breast is very different if you look at it surgically. And what our medical oncologist colleagues are doing is giving something known as neoadjuvant chemotherapy or neoadjuvant systemic therapy. which is these patients are going to get chemotherapy anyway, but we give it before surgery.
Oh.
So it reduces the size of the tumor, and then we don't have to take out the original bed of the tumor. We only take out residual tumor if at all it's left, or when we do the initial biopsy, we put a clip there and we just take out the clip and surrounding area up to a centimeter around it to make sure that there's no tissue left behind that has cancer still.
Okay.
So because radiotherapy and chemotherapy and other systemic therapy has improved so much, we are able to de-escalate surgery. We are able to offer less surgery and conserve the organ more.
Coming to the economics of it, I'm sure a lot of women would like a reconstruction or to, preserve their breasts and preserve their body. But how much does it cost? I'm sure it can vary, but if you could give us some sort of ballpark range.
Right. So let me first give you some, caveats. One is that where are you getting treated? It's a big one. What room you have picked, even in the same hospital, something that is a shared ward versus a single room or a suite is going to vary a lot. But I'll tell you the least of everywhere. So let alone like charity and government hospitals, I'll tell you a general private hospital anyway. So if you're looking at a regular breast conservation surgery or mastectomy, it costs around between 1 to 1.5 lakhs in a shared room.
In a shared room.
Yeah. If you add oncoplasty to it, it will go up to 1.75, the basic oncoplasty. Now, if you are doing a reduction and doing a reduction on the opposite side, you can almost imagine that cost doubling. So it will be around 3 to 3.5. Okay.
Okay.
And then if you are putting an implant, that is also going to be within the range of 3 lakh rupees. But if you are doing a reconstruction using your own tissue, that's more expensive because that surgery lasts longer. You have 2 doctors operating. You have the surgeon and the plastic surgeon. The microscope is used. You do need an ICU stay for at least a day. It is a longer surgery, but I'll tell you it's a more rewarding surgery. There's less chance of long-term complications. Like when you put an implant, there can be some the body makes a capsule around the implant and there can be some contracture, there can be some a little variation in the way the implant finally sits. For a reconstructed breast with your own tissue, it's at least a week, 5 days to a week you have to stay in the hospital, and the minimum cost would probably begin at 5-6 lakhs.
Thanks. So a breast reconstruction using your own tissue is obviously the more expensive, but it's a more rewarding option. Understood. But the material, is there any risk involved in any of these surgeries? Especially using outside material for breast reconstruction, whatever material you use, can that cause further risk of, developing or creating cancer later on in life?
When we put an outside tissue, if you're talking of an implant, there was actually in the news, I think 2 or 3 years back, there was a big scare that putting an implant increases your risk of cancers. So using an implant which was created a little earlier, which were textured implants or PIP implants, they had a slightly higher risk of a cancer of not of the breast, but of the the skin and the soft tissue around it.
Okay.
And when you put an implant, there are some chances of, as I said, having small corrective procedures because the body understands that it's an outside material and it secretes a capsule to cover it. So sometimes there can be a contraction in the capsule, and sometimes later on there can be very, very rarely. And now the implants that we are using are very high tech, and these are, this is all statistics from the implants that were made in the 80s and the 90s, and the implants that are being made now, the grade of silicone and the types, it's very, very different. But sometimes the implants can leak. Right, they can burst and leak inside your body, so then you may need to change the implant.
Yeah, because you don't want to have one cancer, one surgery, a plastic surgery, and then that lead to another type of cancer, lymphoma or melanoma,
definitely.
whatever it is. Coming to statistics, we are seeing, even though maybe cancer is less fatal now than it used to be, but we still hear about a lot of cancer deaths amongst young people. Just coming to statistics in India, I read a post that you've put that every 4 minutes a woman is detected with breast cancer. Is that so? I mean, could you elaborate on the statistics?
Yes, so if you talk about, overall, what we are saying is that breast cancer is the most common cancer in women, not just in India but worldwide. Yes, and patients are being detected with breast cancer if it's 1 in 4 minutes, yes. But the concern with that is not that they're being detected. I mean, the concern is still that we are still detecting breast cancers at a later stage. So almost 30-40% of our breast cancers are locally advanced breast cancers, and that number in a Western country would be maybe 10 or 15%, you know.
Oh.
So we are still detecting breast cancer. We are making small strides in the right direction, because we are having women who are becoming more aware, are going for screenings, and are understanding what breast cancer looks like. And of course treatment is improving, but we are also seeing some patients who are coming with earlier disease whom we can of course give a better cure to. So breast cancer in India is diagnosed in mid to late 40s.
Okay.
That's the median age, which means the most common age of diagnosis of breast cancer here. And breast cancer in Western countries, it's seen in 62 to 64 years. So there is almost a 15-18 years difference between the age at which we are diagnosing breast cancer. Now, why is it so? A is that we don't know the exact reason, but one of the things is that our population is generally very young, and we have a large number of people under the age of 50, because of which a small percentage of that is also a big number. So larger population under 50, overall burden of disease in young women is more, right?
Yeah.
The other thing is that when we talk about a lifetime risk, so you may have heard that 1 in 8 women will develop cancer in their lifetime, but this is the Western data.
Okay.
So we actually have only 1 in 24, 1 in 26 women who develop breast cancer in their lifetime in urban India, which is about a 4% lifetime risk as opposed to a 12% lifetime risk. And in our rural areas, we have 1 in 64 women who will develop lifetime risk of breast cancer, which is much less, which is only 1.5. And why are we seeing these changes? And these are directly linked to the risk factors or the modifiable risk factors of breast cancer that we know of.
Okay.
So if we talk about that a little bit, when we talk of risk factors, we talk about modifiable and non-modifiable. So non-modifiable risk factors are factors or things that we cannot change, right? So age, generally increasing age increases your risk of breast cancer.
Okay.
Being born female increases your
Yeah.
risk of breast cancer, definitely, which doesn't mean that men can't get breast cancer.
Yes, I know
men
they
can
can.
get breast cancer
Yeah.
too. The other thing is that if you have a family history of breast cancer or a genetic mutation that is known, so if you are a known BRCA mutant, then you do have an increased risk of breast cancer. Then other things like having radiation in your childhood for a different cancer like a lymphoma, that can increase your risk. Other things like having your periods early and then continuing for a longer period of time. So having your periods before 12 years of age, it continuing more than 55. So the more number of period cycles that you have actually increases your risk of breast cancer.
Because more estrogen, right?
Yes. So then also what and you know, if you look at it from a different point of view, if you reduce the number of periods in your that you have in your lifetime by having multiple pregnancies, by breastfeeding for a long term, when you're breastfeeding consistently, you don't get your period. Those are actually protective factors. So those are modifiable risk factors.
Interesting.
So you know, reducing the usage of oral contraceptive pills to you know, I mean, of course everyone has that reproductive right, and I'm all for it, but you should look at alternative methods as well. Then other thing is hormone replacement therapy, and that is in older women who have stopped having their period. They get a lot of menopausal symptoms like hot flashes, vaginal dryness, you know, recurrent UTIs. But the first go to should not be an oral hormone replacement therapy. You know,
Okay.
if you have vaginal dryness, there are local estrogen creams that are available which work really well. If you are having hot flashes, there are other treatment options that are available. So speak to your gynecologist and see what are the other options which are available. And if you have to still take, you're not getting relief, then take it for the shortest duration at the lowest dose. You know, like take it for a month or two and then move to the alternative therapies so that you can you know, still get that relief while avoiding long-term
Right.
use of hormones.
Long-term use of hormones. You said something very interesting, that in India, in rural areas, the ratio is much less.
Yeah. So I'm coming to that.
Yes.
So then, you know, then and also women in so other risk factors, and these are all modifiable risk factors like obesity. That really increases your risk of breast cancer, especially menopausal obesity. Drinking alcohol as little as 3 drinks a week can increase your risk of breast cancer.
Wow.
And you know, being physically fit reduces your risk of breast cancer. Having children earlier than the age of 30 reduces your risk of breast cancer. Breastfeeding them for 6 months, 1 year, or even 2 years reduces your risk of breast cancer. And these are all the things that you would see a typical rural woman doing, is probably having children early, being physically fit, walking from point A to B rather than getting in an auto or taking your car everywhere,
Yeah.
eating healthy, fresh, green leafy vegetables, avoiding red meats, avoiding things that come out of a packet, you know, having whole grains. These are things that protect you from breast cancer.
Wow.
And this is what you would see in a rural setup, having multiple pregnancies, breastfeeding, you know, and being, you know, in your normal weight range. All of these things will protect you from breast cancer, and that's the rural lifestyle.
So even having multiple pregnancies, multiple children is better, is less, means it lowers the
Multiple
risk.
full-term pregnancies.
Full
I don't
term.
mean like twins at one time. That
Yeah,
way,
yeah. No, I
yeah,
understood.
multiple full-term, yes. Because as you know, just look back to how it's reducing the number of menstrual cycles you're having.
Right, of
So
course.
it's, yeah.
Very interesting. Of course, and then there's less genetically modified food.
Yes.
Your less preservatives in your food.
Definitely.
Right, and like you said, whole grains, probably less pollution.
Yes.
So-
That is also emerging as a risk factor for breast cancer.
So alcohol, you said even as little as 3 drinks a week, which actually is not so little, it's quite a lot. That also increases the risk.
Yes.
So would you advise people to just go off alcohol?
If you can, sure. And but what I would definitely avoid is binge drinking, you know, that having those 3 drinks together in one night. So when we say 3 drinks, have like a glass of wine on 3 separate days. And you know, I'm saying 3 drinks increases your risk. So have less than 3 drinks if
Right.
you can. But you know, let me say this as maybe not a very oncological perspective, but as a human perspective, is that you can't live your life being scared of everything.
Right.
And you can't change everything just so you never get breast cancer, because if there was one thing that you could do to not get breast cancer, I would tell you, and I'd be happily out of my job. I'd be very happy if breast cancer doesn't exist anymore. But there is no one thing. We still have that one-off person in rural India who's had 7 babies and breastfed all of them for 2 years, is very physically fit, still getting breast cancer.
Yeah.
So these are all risk factors which you can do to reduce your risk. But does anything make you immune to breast cancer? No, there isn't, right?
There is. What about sugar? A lot of people talk about this link between sugar and cancer.
Yeah, there is. That's a big myth, by the way. That
Really?
sugar feeds cancer. It doesn't. Sugar provides energy to every cell of your body. Carbohydrates are sort of, you know, they give you that energy molecule that makes every cell tick. And what consumes the most sugar or most carbs is your brain. That needs fresh carbohydrates. It doesn't function on stored fat. So when you get your carbs, you know, your brain functions better. It's not like that, yes, you know, when you have cancer cells, they draw a lot of energy, but they will draw energy from anywhere. They will use the fat that is stored in your body. That's why sometimes you see patients in like later stages of cancer who have more advanced disease, they will be, you know, very malnutrition or cachexic, what we call, is because cancer cell will take nutrition from anywhere that it can get. Not just because you're having 1 spoon of sugar and your cells are mutating into cancer.
Okay.
That's not how it works.
All right, so a little bit of sugar and carbs is okay.
It's fine, yeah. You
And
need
your
a
brain
balanced
needs it.
diet,
Yeah.
yes. I mean, you don't particularly have to have sugar, but carbs in different forms, like your whole grains and healthy carbs, having some fruits, that's important. Fruits are also sugars. They're natural sugars, but they are sugars, but they're an important part of your diet. That's how you get all the colors of vitamins.
But what about refined sugar? Maybe one should avoid that?
I do.
Okay. All right. What about things like jaggery and honey?
So they're all okay. See, I mean, they are probably better alternatives to refined sugar, but too much of anything is not good. I mean, eventually all of that is sugar, whether it's better sugar or worse sugar. Sugar is sugar.
Okay.
So that doesn't mean just because you say, oh yes, jaggery is healthy, that you're having jaggery for breakfast, lunch and dinner. That's not how it works.
Okay. So coming to diagnosis, I mean, we spoke a bit about it, but early diagnosis can definitely save you, right? And with breast cancer, I mean, this whole thing of 5-year survival rate, right? And first of all, it's the 5-year survival rate is much higher in Western countries than it is in India, and people say that's largely because of earlier diagnosis.
Yes.
Over there.
So a part of it is that they have a lot of screening. So screening has some of it has pitfalls. Sometimes we, when you do a mammogram every year for every woman, you may pick up things which are pre-cancer, and over time they may never have turned into cancer. But if you've picked it up, now you have to treat it now. So understand that screening also picks up very indolent sort of slow growing disease. Those are patients that are going to do well anyway.
But have you ever, had patients who are in a very late stage, metastatic stage, and they have like survived some extraordinary stories?
Yes, we do. So breast cancer is a spectrum of disease. We have really slow growing, cancers which are very hormone sensitive, that we have people coming with, oh, I have had this lump for the last 4 years, and you will see a small lump which is just pulled the breast in, but it's just growing slowly. And those patients, because they have kept it in their body for such a long time, it may have spread outside the breast. So there is chronology and there is actual tumor biology, and there are some tumors which are aggressive to begin with. So even if that patient's had it and seen it only 5 days back, they will already come with a tumor and a lymph node which is already spread.
Generally, cancer spreads faster in younger people, right, than in older people?
So the type of cancer that we see in younger women is generally a little different than what we see in older women. So in older women, we have those hormone sensitive cancers which are generally lower grade, and these are cancers that generally grow slowly. And when we have younger women, we are more likely to see a triple negative sort of breast cancer, and these are generally a little more technically challenging to treat, because although they do respond better to chemotherapy and now immunotherapy, they do have a slightly higher risk of recurrence in the first 2 years of their treatment. So once they go over that 2-year hump, then we know that they're going to probably do well as well.
But coming to again now diagnostic tests, right? I mean, mammogram being the most obvious one for breast cancer. How often should a woman do it, and at what age should she start doing?
Okay, so I'm going to talk about screening and not just about imaging modalities. And screening for breast cancer should actually begin at the age of 20, which is when you should start doing your self-breast examination, and that you should do every month after your periods get over. Okay, because that is the time when your breast is the least sensitive, it's not swollen and tender and things like that. So that's a good time. You should learn what are breast cancer symptoms, and what is the best way, what is the correct way to do your self-breast examination, and that you should start doing at the age of 20. Okay, you may feel that, oh, I've done it for 4 months, nothing has come up, but it's very important to be consistent with it. When you turn 30, you should add and not replace, you should add once a year clinical breast examination, which means going to the doctor and having your breasts examined once a year. That doesn't mean you stop doing your self-breast examination, those checks are mandatory. Once you turn 40, ideally you should discuss with your oncologist or with your gynecologist, am I an appropriate person? Do I need breast cancer screening by other methods? And I'll tell you the risk factors that we have discussed, because we don't have a structured government funded screening program like they do in Western countries. So what I follow is that if any of my patients have the risk factors that we have spoken about, I tell them, yes, go ahead, have a mammogram starting at the age of 40, once every 2 years.
So if you're an average risk, and you're across the age of 40, once in 2 years, you should do your mammogram. But you should be doing your self-check from the age of 20. I mean, how does one do a self-check? Is it just like feeling the breast? I mean, you can use diagrams to show this, but what is it?
No, definitely. So I'll tell you. So self-breast examination is consisting of 3 parts. Okay, there is learn, look, locate, and this was actually put together by a survivor, because she said, everybody should learn, and this is an easy way to learn. Learn, look, locate. What is learning what breast cancer looks like. So the most common symptom of breast cancer is actually a lump in the breast. Right? So painless lump in the breast. The other changes, there can be skin changes like redness of the skin, which you've taken antibiotics, is now going away, orange peel like appearance of the skin, or any like a wound or an ulcer on the skin which is not healing. Those can also be signs of breast cancer. Then nipple changes like a discharge from the nipple which is coming out on its own, which is either blood stained or it's clear. Or a change in direction of the nipple. Is your nipple pulled inside? So some women are born with inverted nipples. I'm not talking about that. Then any change. Sometimes women just say that, oh, my one breast looked bigger than the other. That, or very sometimes there can be a crusting or a scabbing on the nipple as well. Very, very rarely people present with nothing on the breast but a lump in the axilla. Now understand, a lymph node in the axilla can be due to many things, but if you have a significantly large mass in the axilla, in the armpit, which is at least say 2.5 centimeters, then definitely that should raise a concern. And even if you feel something smaller, you can always go to your physician and have it checked out. So any largish lump in your armpit or in your neck, those can sometimes be a sign of breast cancer even if you feel nothing in the breast. Right? Now the second part is look. Now look is looking at yourself in the mirror. So remove the top layer of your clothes and your undergarments and look at yourself in the mirror. Turn right and left. See, is any part of your breast pulled inside? Is there an extra protrusion in any area? And then take your hands up, raise them both up, and see, are both the nipples moving in a similar way, and then bend forward with your arms relaxed and see, are both the breasts falling in the same way. Sometimes a very deep-seated lump can be found in this way because it will be close to the muscle and restrict movement of that muscle. Right? So something that you may not be able to feel with your hand can actually be seen on inspection. Now the third part is locate, which is when you actually touch your breast, which is the part that everyone associates with self-breast examination, and this should be done using 3 fingers and the flat of your 3 fingers, and you press your breast against your rib cage firmly and rotate. So if this is my breast, I'll put it and rotate, and rotate. Now whether you go round and round, you go up and down, or you go in a clockwise, say 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. The point is that you examine your entire breast, and it should start from the clavicle,
right here,
from your clavicle till the end of your breast where it meets your abdomen, from the midline all the way to where your breast ends in the chest wall. So you should cover the entire breast. At the end of that, just press your nipple, check if there's a discharge. Do not press your nipple every day to check if there's a discharge. Do not examine yourself every day of the year. Just do it once a month. If you stimulate your nipples every day, it will start producing something.
And it will get along.
Yeah. And do this in lying down position. So when you examine your left breast, you put your left hand behind, and with your right breast, you will examine your left breast. Same thing for the opposite. Then after you're done with all this, go in for a shower, put some soap on your hands and just glide your hand up and down your breast. And if there's something small, that you was missed in your lying down position, you'll probably be able to feel it better because, soapy hands will glide very well, along your breast. So it takes 2 minutes. But just have to be consistent with it.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's very detailed, extremely crucial information. Thank you for that. So let's come to busting certain myths about breast cancer. Some people say, oh, underwired bras.
Yeah, underwired bras don't cause breast cancer. Black clothes don't cause breast cancer.
Black clothes?
Yeah.
People thought
Deodorant doesn't cause breast cancer. See, there's this very strange thing where people think that, oh, if I wear an underwire bra, if I wear bra at night, the lymph won't drain. Papa, lymph is there in every part of your body. It does not on its own contain toxins. As long as your liver and your kidneys are functioning, the body has a very good drainage system where it throws out any toxins that are created as a part of any chemical reaction in your body.
Why would people
and,
think black
I
clothes
don't know,
cause?
as a
Heat, attracting heat?
yeah, like sun is shining and UV
Yeah,
rays.
yeah. Absorbing the heat, yeah.
Nobody knows. So, a lot of it comes from a book which was published some 15 years ago. I'm forgetting the name. It's called Beauty Kills or something like that, where non-medical people conducted a survey. It was a very random research done without taking any scientific mindset. And because of that, an entire book was published which created such a furor, and we are still in the after effects of that book.
Oh my God. All right. Stay away from that book for sure.
I'm glad I don't remember the name. Then people will go back and look for it.
Can you name some foods that help lower the risk of breast cancer, if there's any such foods?
So, overall, see, what we can tell you is what to avoid. Definitely avoid red meats and avoid anything that comes out of a packet. Overall, whole grains, flaxseed, leafy green vegetables and healthy, nutritious food is good for you, and not just for breast cancer, for everything, but even for breast cancer. And there was a point of time where people used to say that, oh, soya is really bad for you. But recent studies have actually shown that tofu is not bad for you. In fact, it might help you reduce your risk of breast cancer.
Really?
So while there's divided evidence, I would say that don't overdo it in either thing. Just have healthy, nutritious food and you're okay.
Okay, so soya, people thought tofu because of the
because
estrogen.
of the phytoestrogens.
Yeah.
But phytoestrogens do not get absorbed in the body in the same way that animal estrogens do. So it's not the same thing. So,
Coming to
yeah.
genetic factors, right? I mean, there is a gene, right? And how do you determine that? And what do you do? Like, what are the tests you can do, diagnostic tests you can do to see if you have that cancer gene?
Cancer gene. So, just like everything else, like even having a genetic mutation in some of the genes puts you at a higher risk of breast cancer. Now, to put it in perspective, how we talked about lifetime risk in an Indian urban woman is 4%. If you have a BRCA genetic mutation, then your lifetime risk of developing breast cancer is upwards of 50%. So it's 50 to 70%.
Oh, wow.
So it's fairly high. If you have a BRCA2 mutation, it's a little lower, but it's still about 40 to 60%, right? And similarly, they also have other associated cancer risks like ovarian cancers, prostate, pancreas, and colon cancer. So some of these other cancers are also at a higher risk. And then, I mean, we always talk about BRCA1 and BRCA2, but there are other mutations also like PALB2, STK11, which are also implicated in breast cancer. So, who should test? First of all, not every person should go and test. If you have had, if you have family history of breast cancer, then the person who has had the breast cancer should be checking. So who are these people? If you have a personal history of breast cancer under the age of 40, if you have a triple negative breast cancer, almost at any age up to 60, you should check. If you have had breast cancer and you develop it again in the other breast, so you have bilateral breast cancer or you're diagnosed with both sides of breast cancer, you should check. If you have male breast cancer, if you're male and you've developed breast cancer, you should check. If you have if you've developed breast cancer and people in your family, you have one or two first degree relatives, like your mother also had breast cancer at a young age, or two people, your mom and your sister have breast cancer, or if it's a further away, you have like three people, your three first cousins have developed breast cancer at a young age, at 40 years of age, then those are some strong family history, and if you've also got breast cancer, you should check. When we talk about BRCA specifically, BRCA is actually a tumor suppressor gene. So the job of a BRCA gene is to stop cells from becoming cancer cells, or if they become cancer cells, to stop it at that and prevent formation of tumors. When there's a change in BRCA, which means there's a mutation in the BRCA gene, it loses that ability to prevent cancer
Suppress,
from
yeah.
happening. So from suppressing tumors. So that is what we are looking for.
Okay.
When we have patients who are being tested, we don't generally just check for BRCA1 or 2. There is a panel of genes which is at least about 16 genes or 21 genes, in which some of the genes that we talked about, they are all checked. But if I have a BRCA mutation, then my first degree relative should be checked as well. And if I do have the BRCA mutation, then there are different ways of tackling it. One is that high risk screening we talked of. Then the other is chemo prevention. Taking a tablet known as tamoxifen for 5 years can reduce your risk of ever developing cancer, or even some other tablets are available. The other thing is having your ovaries removed after the age of 35. That not only prevents the risk of developing ovarian cancer, but it also reduces the risk of developing breast cancer in the future, because breast is a very hormone dependent organ,
Right.
and ovary is where the hormones are coming from. So we
Okay.
tell these patients, when you're done, your family is complete after the age of 35, you can consider having an oophorectomy.
Right.
And the last one is, of course, having both your breasts removed. Now, if you've never had breast cancer and you're just having the surgery because you're BRCA positive, it is something that we suggest or we talk about with our patients, but we don't really push it, because breast, the organ itself is surveillable, it's surveyable. You can keep it under good surveillance.
Right. Surveyable, yeah.
So you can do an MRI every year, you can do a mammogram every year. Ovaries, we strongly recommend that you remove, because ovarian cancer is very often known as the silent disease or the silent cancer. It grows very slowly, it has very random symptoms like a feeling of fullness or indigestion or heaviness, and that's why patients come very late with it. So ovaries, you're done with family, in your late 30s, you should
Remove
get it out if you're have
the BRCA
genetic
mutation.
Yes,
Right.
definitely. Breast, you can take a call, but we don't particularly stop people.
Like Angelina Jolie did. Right?
Yes, it is a full, it's an Angelina Jolie effect, is a phenomenon, or is something that we talk about when we talk about like the history of breast cancer. There was a definite increase in the number of mastectomies in the United States of America after Angelina Jolie not only had the surgery but was so vocal about it.
Yeah,
in fact,
yeah.
probably unprecedented numbers and unrequired
Yeah,
probably
I would
numbers
say.
of mastectomies. If someone having a breast conservation surgery and someone having a mastectomy is doing equally well, and why do you really want to do a mastectomy? Is the
like a
question.
preventive mastectomy, like
Yeah.
almost like just, a preemptive strike,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, this is the power of influencer. She's not even a doctor.
And we are talking about BRCA positive patients, but unfortunately a trend in Western countries is to have a mastectomy and also discuss or have an opposite side mastectomy for no real high risk reason. So people there without BRCA mutations are also opting for a double mastectomy. So that's
Crazy.
just,
Sorry, I'd call them a bit crazy. But coming to, a little bit about treatments, and then we can just wrap it up. Chemo is sometimes like carpet bombing, right? Very debilitating. Are we seeing a lot of improvements in treatment? Because I still see people around me doing regular chemo, and it really affects the entire body.
Definitely. So with chemotherapy, it's probably the the hardest part of treatment. Not only because of the side effects, which are so obvious. It is visible to a person. We're walking down the street and it's
Yeah.
obvious to a person, but also because it's not one cycle. It lasts at least 4 months, and it can last up to 12 months. There is nothing that at present can replace it. But there is some silver lining. We now have some genomic assays known as Oncotype DX or MammaPrint, which check the genomics of the tumor and tell you, is this tumor really sensitive to chemotherapy? So in some patients who are eligible, we can check the tumor tissue to see if they'll respond. And if they're not going to respond, then there is no point of giving them any chemotherapy. This is of course for hormone receptor positive patients
Right.
in general. Triple negatives, of course, do need chemotherapy because they are very sensitive to chemotherapy. But the other thing now in the basket is immunotherapy,
Right.
and that is actually showing us very good effects for triple negative patients, and it's showing. First, it was showing effect, in the rate at which they were responding prior to surgery, but now also we are seeing an overall improvement in their outcomes. While these very specific and targeted treatments are coming up, very personalized care is coming up, the generic chemotherapy will over time get toned down. So
Right.
we are already talking about, do we really need to give Anthra? And we are already not giving it in most patients who require targeted treatment, and kind of phasing it out
Kind of
in
phasing it out.
patients who don't really need so much chemo.
I understood. I get your drift that you can do all these tests, and then you can, depending on the type and depending on the type of tumor.
Let me try and explain it again.
Okay.
So what chemotherapy drug does, you give it through the IV, it goes and attacks every fast dividing
Right.
cells in the body, which is why you have hair loss, which is why you have ulcers in
Yes.
the mouth, which is why you have some intestinal diarrhea, etc. And that's why your periods stop, because ovary is also another cell which is dividing very fast. Now what these targeted cells do is that they don't go and affect things without targets. So
Right.
if there's an HER2 targeted therapy, it will go and attack the breast cell. It's not going to roam around in the body and target other things. So the side effect profile is much more
Of
limited.
course. Yes.
For
Yeah, so now you can test the tumor, see if it will be receptive to some more targeted therapy, and then
Yes.
do that,
Yeah.
or immunotherapy. So there are other options developing every day, other than that sort of toxic carpet bombing sort of chemo. Thanks. This has all been a great discussion, very, very useful. But if we can end with some tips, basic tips. I know you've given us through the interview, but if you could just sort of wrap it up with 3 basic tips to minimize the risk.
So I would say my number one tip for anybody is to have a non-sedentary lifestyle, is to be active. You're an active person with the same height and weight as a non-active person with the same height and weight is going to do better. The other thing is eat healthy, and the third thing I would tell you is to be aware and do your screening. Whether you do that mammo or not, know what breast cancer looks like. At least you shouldn't miss it on yourself. So self breast examination, clinical breast examination, above mammogram. Mammogram is something that we discuss. Do we really need it for the incidents that we are seeing? Do it if you have a higher risk. One last thing I
Yes,
would like
of course,
to say
please.
is that when we do self breast examination, when we do clinical breast examination, we start talking about breast and remove that stigma from the breast, remove the shame from breast, and talk about it like any other organ. Only if a person is able to come forward, which is what I meant really when I said that come forward with your disease, is that don't be ashamed of it, don't be shy. I mean, it's like any other body organ.
Absolutely. Remove that stigma. Very, very valuable inputs and information in this interview. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Anushka. It was a real pleasure being here today.
Thank you.